Yo, you're watching the Screamingfish here, people, and once again I'm here for you guys with yet another video, and this time, as you can tell by the clearly very obvious title at the bottom of the screen, we are taking a look at the latest adaptation of a Stephen King classic, It, which, by the way, the trailer scared the hell out of me. So, yeah, I went into this movie thinking, oh god, I'm gonna poop my pants. But anyway, let's quit rambling and get on with the review. And yeah, I know it's late. I've been busy, alright? I'll admit, I'm one of the many cinema goers out there who is getting sick and tired of the seemingly never-ending stream of movie remakes. While a lot of studios do come out and say that the movie they've remade is actually a reboot, well, that's where a lot of them are actually wrong. In fact, there's a pretty big difference between a movie remake and a reboot. You see, a movie remake is a movie that tells the exact same story as the movie it's remaking, with a few tweaks here and there to make it seem somewhat different from the original. And a reboot, on the other hand, is a reimagining of the original. It uses the same concept as the original, but takes it in a completely new direction in order to put a different spin on it. And that's exactly the reason why movies like Batman Begins work so well. Christopher Nolan took a familiar concept and put his own spin on it, and you know what? It was frickin' brilliant. In terms of whether or not I would describe it as a straight-up remake of the miniseries or a reboot with a new spin on it, well, I honestly feel kind of inclined to call it a little bit of both. We do get recreations of scenes from the miniseries that play out almost exactly the way they did in the miniseries, but at the same time there's a whole bunch of new material here that wasn't even remotely explored in the miniseries, and it really does pay off. It is a fantastic horror movie, but not only does it work on all levels in terms of genuine horror, but it also works as a brilliant tale of friendship and facing one's biggest fears. To put it short, I absolutely loved this movie. Before I begin though, some of you may be wondering what I actually think of the original miniseries. I'll be honest, the first half of it, where they're all kids, is pretty good, and I love Tim Curry, but the rest of the series that feature the same characters as adults is pretty bad. It's fun to watch, but I wouldn't watch it again. This movie, on the other hand, I would watch again any day. Why? Let's get into that. Instead of the film playing out like the miniseries did and having the first half being about these characters when they're kids and then the rest of the film being about them as adults, this film is entirely about the kids, which I think is an ingenious move, and it adds more depth and layers to these characters. The friendship that's formed between these characters due to their individual experiences with Pennywise is easily the strongest element of the movie. There was never a dull moment when these characters were on screen, partly because I was so invested in their friendship. Watching these characters interact with each other really did remind me of the remarkable chemistry between the cast of The Goonies, and with that said, I would easily say that the chemistry between these characters is just as strong, and I found myself praying for pretty much all of them to make it out of this movie alive and well. Having the movie just be about these characters when they're kids adds a sense of vulnerability that wasn't present in the original. The writing for these characters is just perfect. When you watch these characters on screen, they actually feel like real kids. A common mistake that a lot of writers make is that we often get child characters who act a lot older than they actually are and therefore don't feel real or relatable. Thankfully, similar to what the Duffer Brothers did in Stranger Things, the writers of this film have crafted a script that not only works with the characters but manages to make them likable, relatable, and in some cases pretty funny. And the actors playing these kids knock it out of the park. These guys do a brilliant job at bringing these characters to life and doing them justice. Jaden Lieberher, apologies for butchering the hell out of that name, is remarkably convincing as the leader of the group, or in this case the Losers Club, and the determination and willpower that he had in this film grew on me with every second of screen time. I was worried that his stutter would become a little annoying, but I became more accustomed to it, and looking back, I think it added a cool twist on the leader-type character. Finn Wolfhard, who of course is in Stranger Things, is, to put it simply, brilliant. He was a perfect mix of charm, wit, and sarcasm, and a lot of his comedic lines hit, and that's yet another pro. This movie is actually surprisingly funny, and there's a lot of small funny moments between these characters that make for some good laughs. Sophia Lillis without a doubt stole the show here. In the miniseries, I would definitely say that the character Beverly Marsh was by far the weakest and very poorly written, but here she was great. I found her character to be very interesting, and there's a very compelling side plot involving a family member that I won't spoil here that wasn't touched upon too much in the miniseries, but here it was executed brilliantly. As for the rest of the club, Wyatt Olaf does a good job at portraying the slightly cowardly and nervous Stan. Chosen Jacobs is great as Mike Hanlon, who I thought had a really interesting backstory and was overall a great character. Jeremy Ray Tyler is great as Ben, and Jack Dylan Grazer was perfect for the role of the asthmatic and vulnerable Eddie. Surprisingly, I actually found myself feeling sympathy for Henry Bowers, played by Nicholas Hamilton, who is essentially the bully of this small town, and pretty psychotic. But they actually gave him a little backstory that actually explained why he's like that, and I thought that was a nice touch. Andrei Muschietti directed this film fabulously. He did a lot of cool tricks with the camera, and I like how the film was cut together. Visually, it's breathtaking. The cinematography is a beautiful nightmare. There's a lot of graphic and gruesome imagery, but at the same time, it's competently shot and beautiful to look at. The horror, like I said before, is superb. From memory, I can only recall 2 jump scares. And while those 2 scares were very effective, it's refreshing to see a horror movie that's not heavily reliant on jump scares. Instead, we get a lot of long, unbroken takes of extremely creepy imagery, and the scares are cleverly built up thanks to an engaging sound design and beautiful cinematography. This movie does not hold back. There's a lot more gore in this movie than there was in the miniseries, and it pays off, and it added something to the horror that made it all the more terrifying. I was squirming in my seat, and similar to my experience watching Annabelle Creation, the people sat next to me showed no remorse and laughed their asses off at me whenever I jumped out of my seat. And how could I have gotten this far into the review without even mentioning the real star of the show, Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise? Now this was the role I was the most concerned about. I was very worried about how this was going to go because I wanted to be creeped out more than anything, and oh my god, did he deliver. Bill Skarsgård is freaking terrifying. Everything from the way he smiles to the way he moves and even his overall behavior is just uncomfortable. That was clearly the desired effect, and it worked. This is one of the scariest portrayals of a horror icon I have ever seen. The sound of his voice was enough to give me goosebumps. I honestly can't imagine anyone else playing this character better than Bill Skarsgård. He was truly terrifying. I also have to give the writers props for not revealing too much about it. We don't even know where he comes from, why he's doing all these horrible things, or what exactly it is. I appreciate that they chose to create terror by not answering those questions. The less you know about it, the scarier it becomes. I actually found the film to be very similar to Alien in that regard. I had a blast with this film. I went to see this with a really good friend of mine, and while it did scare the crap out of both of us, we both came out smiling. It is an excellent horror movie, and a movie that also does, in a way, cry out to audiences and metaphorically states that there's always going to be a time in your life where you have to face your fears. But above all, it's a movie about friendship and the bond that's formed between these characters and this evil entity that's trying to tear them apart. If you're a horror fan, you're going to love this, and I highly recommend you check this one out. So guys, those are my thoughts on it. I do hope you enjoyed this video. I had a blast with it. It's definitely a better Stephen King movie than The Dark Tower was, and I'm really glad that I liked it more than that film because, as you know, I didn't like The Dark Tower. But anyway, once again, I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I got Twitter now. And I hope you have a lovely day. So, now I've got to get through at least a few months of nightmares about killer clowns. So, if you'll excuse me, I'm just gonna go do that. Bye.